Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, unit number 9, the first man in space. Dear kids, look at the given picture. Can you name the object? It is a rocket. And what's going on in this picture? You can see an astronaut and a rocket. Well, have you ever traveled to any place? What did you like about that place? And do you want to travel in space? Just think, how can we travel in space? And what happens to us when we are in space? Well, we are talking about traveling to space, but do you know what is space? Well, in astronomy and cosmology, space is the vast three-dimensional region that begins where the Earth's atmosphere ends. It is sometimes called 3D space because it contains three distinct dimensions. Let's start reading the chapter. In the middle of the 20th century, the Russians and the Americans started working on the possibility of traveling in space. They launched several rockets which went around the Earth. The first rockets carried only scientific instruments. Later, animals were sent. The Russian scientists were then ready to send up a man. They chose Major Yuri Gagarin to be the first cosmonaut. Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin was then 27 years old. He was born in 1934 in the city of Smolensk. His father was a carpenter. When Yuri grew up, he joined the Russian Air Force and trained as a jet aircraft pilot. On April 12, 1961, early in the morning, Yuri was informed that he will fly in Vostok 1. The flight was to take off the same day. Yuri had been given very special and very difficult training. He had to learn the use of the scientific instruments in the spacecraft as well as about rockets. He was given very tough physical training because it was not known what the effect of traveling in space would be on the human body and mind. Dear kid, stop for a while and think. Why do you think that Yuri was taking a great risk? And what if you would be there instead of him? He was trained to get used to absolute silence and to remain alone in darkness. Yuri found this quite difficult. He said later, there was no sound, not even the slightest rustle, no movement of air, nothing. He spent this time reciting poetry to himself. The experience of weightlessness was given in a very interesting way. The express lift of the great Moscow University building was used to give him a drop of 500 feet at high speed. He found himself hanging between the floor and the ceiling of the lift without support. In this way, zero gravity was created. Oh, what if you would be there instead of him? Gagarin was taking a great risk. If anything went wrong, he would lose his life. But Gagarin was ready for any risk. He had faith in the ability of Russian scientists and engineers. On the morning of April 12, 1961, Gagarin put on his spacesuit, on top of which he wore a pale blue fiber suit and finally an orange suit. When all the instruments were ready, Gagarin said, "Right, let's go on up." At 9:07 a.m. Moscow time, Vostok was launched by its powerful motors. At its peak, it reached 17,500 miles an hour at a height of about 190 miles above the Earth. Gagarin could look through the porthole of his pressurized cabin and see the Earth far below. He could make out coastlines, river, forest, and cloud as he flew about 200 miles above. All this was mentioned when he spoke to the scientists on Earth over the radio. He made scientific measurements and gave a running commentary on what he saw. 45 minutes after the launch, he was over South America. A little later, he flew over the Atlantic Ocean, and after an hour of space flight, he passed over the coast of Africa. He had loosened the straps which tied him to his seat. His body rose slightly above the seat because of weightlessness. He was in fact floating in his cabin. Just imagine. He reported, "All is well. I am not too much troubled by the feeling of weightlessness." He looked out of his porthole again. Even in sunlight, the sky looked black. The earth had a brilliant orange outline. The descent was the most difficult and dangerous part of the journey. The spacecraft could burn up. The speed of Vostok had to be controlled. When the Vostok was not far from the ground, Gagarin's cabin was separated from the rest of the rocket. A huge parachute opened and the cabin with Gagarin in it floated gently down to the ground. Two patient women walking in the fields saw him and came running. They thought a spy had landed. Gagarin gave them his bright smile and said in their own language, "Give me a hand." Gagarin's journey was over. His flight had lasted 1 hour and 48 minutes. He had created history. He was the first man in space. Well, do you know who was the first person to climb the biggest mountain of the world? Time to know my vocabulary. Launched. Sent a spacecraft in space. Absolute, complete. Risk, chance of danger or injury. Descent, climbing down. Rockets, tube-shaped machines used for space travel. Weightlessness, having no weight because of flying in space. Porthole, round window in a ship, plane or spacecraft.